The devil who ruled Boston. He was a ghost in the streets of Boston. A killer cloaked in shadows. Protected by the FBI. Hated by the people. And feared by everyone. But even ghosts can bleed. This is the true, terrifying story of Whitey Bulger, the man who built an empire out of blood, lies, and betrayal, and died a death more brutal than any he ever gave. Childhood in South Boston. James Joseph Bulger, J.R.B., was born in 1929 in the working-class Irish neighborhood of South Boston, known to locals as Southie. His father lost his arm in an industrial accident, and the family struggled in a place where respect was earned with fists. Young Whitey learned fast. He wasn't just another poor Irish kid. He was different. Meaner. More cunning. A boy with a cruel imagination and a hunger for power. By 14, he joined a gang called the Shamrocks. By 16, he was already racking up charges, stealing cars, fighting, robbing stores, early crimes and prison time. In his early 20s, Whitey escalated. He robbed banks across multiple states. The FBI finally caught him, and he was sentenced to federal prison. He spent time in Atlanta, Leavenworth, and even Alcatraz, America's most infamous prison. There, behind bars, he learned discipline, violence, and the power of silence. He also volunteered for a secret government LSD experiment used on inmates without consent. Whitey would later claim it haunted him for life, but if anything, it only made him colder. Rise in the Winter Hill Gang. When Whitey was released in 1965, he returned to a very different Boston, but he came back smarter. More lethal. He joined the Winter Hill Gang, led by Howie Winter. Within a few years, Whitey's ruthless nature made him indispensable. He was running illegal gambling, loan sharking, arms deals, and even dabbling in drugs, despite claiming he hated them. But he had one secret weapon no other gangster had. He was an FBI informant, the FBI's devil's bargain. His childhood friend, John Connolly, was now a rising FBI agent. Whitey offered a deal. He'd give information on the Italian Mafia, their biggest target, in exchange for protection. The FBI accepted. And thus began one of the most corrupt relationships in American law enforcement history, while Bulger ratted on his enemies. Connolly tipped him off on investigations, arrests, and wiretaps. Whitey used the FBI to eliminate rivals and rise to the top, all while murdering people in cold blood. Trail of murders. He murdered Deborah Davis, the longtime girlfriend of his closest ally, Stephen Flemmi, because she knew too much. Whitey strangled her with his bare hands while Flemmi watched. He murdered John McIntyre, a fisherman who planned to inform on a failed gun-running mission to the IRA. Whitey tortured him, interrogated him for hours, then shot him and buried his body in a cellar. He murdered Brian Halloran, a former associate turned informant. Whitey had him gunned down in broad daylight on the waterfront, along with another innocent man. In total, he would be tied to at least 19 murders, though many believe the real number is higher. Control through fear and extortion. Whitey claimed he hated drugs. He told young dealers to stay clean. But behind the scenes, he was taking a cut from every major cocaine operation in South Boston. Nightclubs, bars, strip clubs, every business paid him protection money. If they refused, they vanished. He became untouchable. The FBI had his back. His enemies feared him. His friends didn't know when they'd be next. He ruled Boston like a dictator. And yet, he played the role of a neighborhood Robin Hood buying kids ice cream, donating to churches, handing out turkeys on Thanksgiving. The fall of Whitey Bulger. But in 1994, the game began to crack. The Massachusetts State Police and D had started building their own case on Bulger. They didn't trust the FBI. Rightfully so. Just before his arrest, Whitey was tipped off by Connolly and vanished, gone. Like a phantom, life on the run. For 16 years, Whitey Bulger evaded capture. He traveled across the U.S. and overseas. He lived under the name Charlie Gosco with his longtime girlfriend, Catherine Grieg. They lived a quiet, retired life in Santa Monica, California, just blocks from the beach. But in 2011, a tip from a former neighbor blew his cover. The FBI raided the apartment inside. Dozens of weapons, ammunition, and over $800,000 in cash hidden in the walls. At last, the ghost was in chains. The trial of the century. In 2013, Bulger faced justice. He was tried for 32 counts, including 11 murders. The trial was explosive. Witnesses described beatings, stabbings, strangulations. Families of victims sat in silence, eyes locked on the old man who once ruled their streets with terror. Bulger smirked. He showed no remorse. But the court showed no mercy. He was sentenced to 2 life sentences, plus 5 years, a brutal death behind bars. In 2018, Bulger was quietly transferred to Hazleton Prison, a notoriously violent federal facility. Less than 12 hours later, he was dead. A fellow inmate, a Mafia hitman, allegedly used a lock inside a sock to bludgeon him to death. His eyes were gouged out, his tongue nearly cut off, a symbolic execution retribution from the very underworld he once controlled. Legacy of terror. Whitey Bulger's reign of terror left scars that Boston still carries. His name once struck fear into the hearts of every resident, but today it stands as a haunting reminder of how power and corruption can poison a city from within. Murals of victims, faded graffiti that says justice and never forget families. Of his victims still mourn in silence, haunted by memories that no prison sentence can erase. Every street corner, every bar, every block where Whitey ruled feels the weight of his legacy. One cannot forget the victims, the lives stolen, futures shattered, dreams extinguished by a man who hid behind the law while breaking it with savage cruelty. The FBI's dark secret, but perhaps the darkest part of Whitey Bulger's story, is the stain he left on American law enforcement itself for decades. The FBI not only failed to stop him, they actively protected him. The corrupt bargain between Bulger and Agent John Connolly was a betrayal of justice so deep, it shook the FBI to its core. Connolly and others turned a blind eye to murders, extortion, and drugs, all for the sake of a fragile war against the Italian Mafia. Whitey wasn't just a criminal. He was a weapon and a shield. In a twisted game of law and crime, the psychological profile of a monster. What kind of man could live a double life so brutally, so coldly? Experts say Whitey Bulger had traits of a psychopath, charming on the surface, merciless underneath. His charm won friends and deceived enemies. His paranoia fueled violent betrayals. And his loyalty. It was only to power and survival. He understood fear better than love, using it to control everyone around him, justice a hollow victory. When Whitey was finally sentenced, many hoped it was the end. Justice served, but some ask, is justice ever truly served when a man like Bulger can escape for 16 years? When so many police officers and FBI agents were complicit? His story exposed cracks in the system where ambition and corruption can shield evil and destroy truth. And though he died behind bars, some say his ghost still haunts the corners of Boston's streets. Lessons from the darkness. But from darkness comes hope. Boston has worked hard to reclaim its soul-building programs to help youth stay away from crime, honoring victims, and striving for transparency in law enforcement. Whitey Bulger's story is a grim warning. When fear rules and corruption reigns, no one is safe, but it is also a call to action, a call to never let evil hide behind lies again. Whitey Bulger was a man who wielded terror as a weapon and corrupted the very people sworn to stop him. But in the end, no empire built on fear lasts. Forever, Boston outlived its darkest shadow. And so must we all. Weapons trafficking and IRA connections. Behind the scenes, Whitey was not just dealing with drugs and extortion. He was also trafficking weapons in the 1980s. Bulger orchestrated a secret operation to smuggle guns and explosives to the Irish Republican Army IRA. Through contacts in Boston's Irish community, he helped send weapons to militants fighting British forces in Northern Ireland. One of the most infamous attempts was the Valhalla shipment, a boat loaded with machine guns, rifles, and ammo. Though the shipment was intercepted and the plot foiled, Bulger's fingerprints were all over it. His alliance with the IRA wasn't just ideological, it gave him global reach and further blurred the line between gangster and terrorist. The case may be closed, but criminology never sleeps. Like and subscribe at join Criminology and step deeper into the dark with us.